uniform deterioration in a single water parameter, regardless of the overall impact. This is not about protecting the environment. This is a bureaucratic trap. The soil monitoring law adds yet another layer of permits, reporting, and inspections, delaying building approvals by months, sometimes years. And then the heart of the problem, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, EPBD, overly detailed, centralized, and costly. It undermines subsidiarity and raises construction and renovation costs, both in our cities and rural areas. Colleagues, this is a regulatory avalanche of the EU's own making. If we truly want to tackle the housing crisis, we must face the truth. Without reducing red tape, homes will not be built. The EU needs a housing simplification package. Less ideology, less paperwork, and more homes. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the ECR, Mr. Splat.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. Thank you for having introduced this European plan for affordable housing. Having listened to the interventions, I think indeed we have to focus on the written version as well and know what ought to be expected. So we need clear issues of subsidiarity have to be considered, of course, and that regions, cities, countries as well ought to be able to conduct their particular affairs, but there has to be that coordination as well. We have to offer real solutions to dealing with individuals, young people, workers, families that are, all those that are particularly vulnerable, to offer to them European affordable housing indeed. So we have to have a particular approach. And I hope that it will not only be something that focuses only on cities, but also the regions as well, because regions have this problem as well. It is not something which is only in urban areas. And it would be a display of cohesion policy as well if we take into consideration development in these particular regions as well. We want some sort of equilibrium between cities and regions as well. And we want a plan that doesn't confuse the European orientation and European endeavors with those which are taking place at the regional level. We don't want that type of redundancy, which is so characteristic in other policies. This is very important, and I do hope that we'll find a plan which doesn't ignore the issue as providing to those who are in need above all. So we do hope to be able to deal with this problem with a text which is balanced, which takes into consideration the idiosyncrasies, urban areas, provincial areas as well, so that we can arrive altogether to a situation where all have access to affordable housing. Thank you.
Van den Berg. Thank you. For a new, Ms. Van den Berg.
Your own place, a spot in the sunshine, and someone in the neighborhood that can always love you. This is the start of a nostalgic hit song in the 80s in the Netherlands because it was such a given that everybody had their own home. But how different are things now? Europeans pay more than 60% more to housing than in 2015. And in Hungary, that's even 200%. The cost of housing grew almost 4 times more than our wages. And this means that many young Europeans only leave their house when they're in their mid-30s. They are forced to pass on opportunities or delay crucial decisions like starting a family because they cannot find a place to live. People are rightfully furious and rely on policymakers to come up with solutions. And the EU is now assuming its responsibility. Besides local, regional and national governments, we are enabling these solutions. The plan is comprehensive and it focuses directly on the construction workers and the technicians who are going to build our houses, because bricks don't stack themselves. We are investing in people, and we will prove it can be done. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Für die Grünen Fraktion spricht. Thank you. For the Greens, Ms. Oysa.
Chair, Commissioner, colleagues, tonight 1.3 million people in the European Union do not have a place to call home. Not because they chose it, but because politics has failed to provide it. And home is a human right. Yet hundreds of thousands of fellow human beings are living in the streets of our union, the union that preaches about human rights and equality. In its affordable housing plan, the Commission has acknowledged the graveness of the problem of homelessness, and I want to thank you for that. But it actually does not provide very concrete measures on how to solve it, so let me help a bit. Housing first principle must be implemented across the European Union, and for that we need a real shift in mindset. We need to put people in the centre, and we need to give them more control over their housing and related support. We need more housing counselling to prevent evictions, more coordinating policies across sectors, and investment in professional expertise. And finally, we do need simply more affordable housing, not speculation, but homes for human beings.
Dankeschön für die.
Thank you very much for the left. Our colleague Charlie. Thank you very much. Commissioner, the action plan for affordable housing is something we've been waiting for a long time. Throughout Europe are being chased from the centers of towns, which have become museums, and are being sent off to other areas. This is the right to housing that we're talking about. You preferred to give this to the construction lobby. Listening to you, the solution is the market and the competition. You mentioned the market 39 times in your legislation. You're going down the wrong road because the market is the cause of the problem. I think about Mirja, who's been in a flat with 3 children, a 1-bedroom flat. I'm talking about Matteo, who serves coffee in a town in Italy, but who has to travel 3 hours to get there because I can't afford housing there. I'd like to urge you to read this. It's been drafted with 100 citizens of Europe, so please read it and set you on the right road. For SNS, Henrik.
The situation on the market in the European Union is tragic. In 2003, almost every 10th person spent 40% or more of their income on housing. The availability of housing in Poland is one of the lowest in Europe. And suddenly, Eurocrats realized you can't hide it anymore. So typically, in the Brussels way, they try to solve the problem. They specify a plan, new debts for investments, new tasks for themselves. While it's the Eurocrats who led to the tragedy on the housing market. According to analysts, full adjustment of Polish buildings to new EU standards of the building directive will cost 2.5 billion Polish zloty. Because of European climate policy, the prices of energy are growing, which is a problem for housing in the whole continent. A year ago, I submitted an application to give up on the housing directive. It was rejected. Now I am asking the citizens to sign a petition. And the best way to solve the problem on the housing market in Europe is to send Eurocrats and the housing directive and the ETS2 to the space. Thank you.
Das beschließt die Runde der Fraktionssprecher.
Well, that closes the round of the speakers from the groups, and I'm now going to be a little bit stricter with the time. Mr. Jimenez-Glaras.
Thank you, President. When we're talking about housing, we're not just talking about bricks and mortar. We're talking about life projects, young people who want to become independent, to move out of their families and to have stability. And we know that the European Union does not have a magic wand to solve the problem. There is not a single housing market. There are 27. And the role of states, regions and local authorities is vital. But we also know that there are some shared causes that should be tackled at a European level. From the outset in this crisis, we have said clearly, in Europe, we now have a problem with supply. The Commission is now recognising that. We don't have enough homes. It is thought that we lack 4 million homes to meet demand. And if we don't have the homes, then the prices go up. In the face of that, the response is clear. We must build more, and we need to simplify, less bureaucracy, planning permissions, digital procedures, standards which help things and don't block construction. We need to mobilise investment, both public and private. And we also need to strengthen the right to home ownership, legal certainty for families, stability for markets, and confidence to invest. We need lower taxes, and we need incentives to build, to renovate and rent out. Commissioner, forget all of the ideological dogmas, forget the empty policies. They're more rhetoric than realism. We need to focus on real solutions. We should be working to ensure that all Europeans can build a home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sir.
By colleague Mai, would you accept it?
Sorry, yes.
Yes.
Yes, of course.
Please, 52, please.
Ja, dank u wel. Ik zal in het Nederlands spreken.
Thank you. I'll speak Dutch. It's very good, the proposals that we're seeing from the Commission, for example, to adapt the state support rules. This is a historical day today that we have this proposal for the housing plan, but I hear you saying, and I'm glad that you accepted this question, you're saying that the plans of the Commission are a step in the right direction in terms of improving the role of the market, but are we not romanticizing the role of the market as a solution? Because we see that if we don't have support from the state, the prices just skyrocket. So how do you hope to stop that?
Sí, yo voy a contestar.
Well, I'm going to speak in Spanish, if I may. The reality is that from our perspective, what we see is that we have a crisis in supply. We need to build 4 million homes in the European Union, and that is why demand has grown over recent years, over recent decades. It's because of changes to family structures, it's because of more people arriving from abroad, and that means that we have this need to build more housing. And I think that's what we're focusing on now. In order to do that, the Commissioner's plan, I think, is pointing in the right direction. We have this proposal to simplify the rules and regulations, and that should mean that the long periods that you need to build more housing can be brought down, and that should help the building sector.
We cannot take a blue card on a blue card, so we will continue now met de collega Tinali.
Thank you, Chair, and sorry, President, and sorry for my low voice. But this doesn't take, away my enthusiasm for what it's been done today. Housing affordability has become one of the most urgent challenges facing Europe today. For millions of citizens, access to affordable housing is no longer a marginal issue because it directly affects their life, the opportunities they can access, and also their trust in our ability to deliver solutions. That's why today it is so important. And I'm really happy to see that finally housing is at the core of the Commission's work, as we've been asking for many, many years. So the plan presented today actually really goes in the right direction, but not just for construction. It's a very complex, comprehensive plan because it goes at the roots of the problem, which is a complex one. So it includes support for public investments, of course also support for private investments to crowd them in towards a social good, a reform of the services of general interest framework to allow for better and more state aid, a strong focus on sustainability, a legislative response on short-term rentals, and for the first time, a serious approach to address speculation. That's what we need.
Please really
we need
come
a
to an end now.
response to really provide solutions for our citizens. Thank you.
And for the sake of transparency, we have very many catch the eye requests. So if you request a blue card now, it might be likely that then you might not be given a catch the eye afterwards. So you know, but you don't know exactly if you will have it anyway, so it's up to you to make a choice, but I just want to be very transparent there. We cannot have more than a dozen catch the eyes. So next speaker is colleague Busha de Villalba.
Provocan una crisis.
They cause a crisis and then they use that crisis to gain power. The people in the centrist parties, the people who've been in charge for the last 60 years, have condemned several generations of young people in Europe to continue living at home with their parents and or sharing flats with lots of other people they don't know. And you're responsible for that. It's called co-living or co-housing. It's a housing plan which hides the situation of lots of foreigners coming into Europe, and it's a fraud. You want to re-establish a market, well, then you need to bring down legitimate demand, expel all of the illegal immigrants wherever they come from, deportation of legal criminal immigrants who commit crimes, and then people who live on welfare, including housing benefits, must be tackled. Then we need to free up the land which has been taken by politicians to speculate with the future of the nation. And thirdly, we need to eliminate or reduce illegitimate barriers to trade. You need to get rid of all of the taxes along the chain, reduce timeframes, reduce costs, getting rid of ridiculous requirements imposed by climate fanatics. So fewer plans and more cranes, more owners and fewer squatters. We want less pan-European and more local communities. Thank you.
Do you accept a blue card by colleague Gonçalves?
Muito obrigado. Falarei em português.
I'll speak in Portuguese. You're speaking about young Europeans. I'm young as well. Let me tell you about my particular case. You're trying to connect migration with the affordable housing crisis. Let me give you the example of a city, Lisbon. They did exactly what you suggested. They reduced taxes, and at this particular point in time, the housing is more affordable. It's better to rent a house in Lisbon. In other words, but what we've seen at the same time, that an increase in rents threefold as compared to salaries. So actually what you've proposed is no solution whatsoever.
Señor Gonçalves.
Well, Mr. Gonçalves, are you speaking on behalf of young people with the salary you have? Most of the millions of young people in Europe don't have the kind of salary that you or I have. And secondly, second point, if you look at the last 5 years in Spain, 3 million foreigners have turned up and arrived, and they have to live somewhere. They need a home, don't they? So who's going to build these homes? If you were in government in all these places, we cannot allow this kind of imbalance in the market. And of course, we have to build more flats. And of course, we have to stop the illegitimate entry into the market of people who do not have a right to be in Europe.
Schön, folgende Rednerin ist die Kollegin Theodore.
Can I speak?
The Commission finds money for a multitude of things, and yet of the nearly 2 trillion allocated to the future EU budget, we have not been able to identify an amount dedicated exclusively to solving the housing crisis. The plan presented by the Commission is well-intentioned. However, it lacks a backbone, a budget allocated exclusively to financing affordable housing. Today, Europe is at war with an invisible enemy, demographic decline. Every young person who does not have a stable roof over their head, every family that cannot afford to buy a home, every citizen who cannot afford the luxury of a home means, in fact, the slow but sure disappearance of European civilization. Europe's security cannot be achieved through armament alone. The EU security requires European citizens with stable livelihoods and a positive demographic trend. I call on the Commission to consider, as it did in the case of the NRRP, the creation of a fund with grants and loans for affordable housing. I have submitted this amendment in the House Committee report, and it is a red line that I will not cross. Otherwise, this debate, the future report, and any strategy in this regard will remain nothing but empty words.
Dankeschön. Nächste Rednerin ist die Kollegin Thun.
Thank you very much. Ms. Thun.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioner, dear colleagues. What stands out to me after almost 1 year in the Housing Committee is that no two housing situations I heard were the same. There are some common partners, of course, but it is clear that many of these issues come from national and regional challenges. So while I normally take the floor in this chamber to criticize the Commission for not being ambitious enough, This time I have to support the Commission for taking a more careful and realistic approach. Colleagues, let's not kid ourselves. The Union does not have the power to fix many of the housing crises in Member States with one regulation. And promising anything more than we can deliver will only undermine our credibility. Yes, we need bold and urgent action to make housing more affordable, and we will definitely play our part. But the real drivers of the change are our countries and regions. So let's make sure that we offer all the tools and measures we can so that national and regional authorities can work to fix their local issues. Thank you.
Dankeschön. Next.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bosanak.
Zahvaljujem. Građani Europske unije s velikim su...
Thank you very much. EU citizens have been looking forward to this plan, and in political terms, Commissioner, today you have a unique opportunity to be much more decisive. Public support for ambitious measures is now clear. The plan has its positive side, especially when it comes to the restrictions on short-term rentals, energy renovation, and the repurposing of neglected buildings, also looking after students and homeless people. However, I'm interested in the idea of using EU funds to build new housing. How can we make sure that this investment doesn't mean to more financialization of house building? You want to have simpler planning permissions. Yes, that's a good idea, but it shouldn't be at the expense of planning the environment or quality of life. In Croatia, under the pretext of affordable housing, the government is trying to simplify planning at the expense of cities. And this is an approach which has led to a lot of opposition. So we ought not to allow the positive story about affordable housing turning into something which is not so positive and might turn people against the European institutions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jordvan.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you very much, President. For years now, rents have been too high and people have not been able to afford them. We've got more and more houses being let through Airbnb. More than 18 million people in Germany are affected. Neighborhoods are being destroyed. More and more people are being forced from their houses if they have low income. There's a fundamental crisis on the market of housing. And finally, the Commission is waking up, but instead of doing something about the causes, they want to combat it using the market and more private investment. We want to have limits on rents. We want to have limits on Airbnb and other sites. And we want to have a ban on putting old people and families with children out of their homes. There's a right to housing, and that's essential for people who are renting and for the social cohesion in our towns. Thank you very much, Ms. Bostov.
Ja, verehrte Kollegen,
Colleagues.
von der Leyen auf nahezu allen Politikfeldern versagt hat.
Ursula von der Leyen has failed in almost all political areas, and we've had this left-green ideology, and now we've found a new policy area, the housing crisis. And that's not fallen from the skies, it's homemade, and it is the result of the policies of this Commission. The EU is tackling the housing crisis with the same resources that they've used in the past, more regulations, more rules, more intervention. Housing is not something that you can regulate into existence or order or moralize into existence. If you want affordable housing, then you have to allow affordable construction, and that is just what this EU is preventing. The Green Deal makes it expensive to build, it makes it slow and almost impossible. Climate ideology does not build houses. Concrete does not come from regulations. And what about immigration? We have millions of people arriving legally or illegally to Europe. Immigration without housing is not humanitarian. It is just a kind of pressure. We don't need a housing committee. We need sovereign member states, honesty, and a re-migration committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Zakaria.
The committee presents today a plan for affordable housing. But let's speak clearly. The housing crisis is not a natural phenomena. It's the result of free market. The Commission speaks about investments and offering. We're speaking about people who lose their houses. They've lost them to auctions. We're speaking about families that have been tossed onto the street by funds and banks with the okay of the European Commission. And all those people in Greece that were tricked by the banks with those Swiss franc loans. Silence on that particular front. At that funds have been buying up homes. They've been increasing rent. They've turned homes into some sort of item for merchandise. It's a merchandise item. So what we need are protection of a first home, an end to all auctioning of houses, getting rid of speculation, getting rid of banking activities on the real estate market, and getting rid of Airbnb and golden visas. So as long as the European Union protects golden visas and not individuals, we're lost. We have to put people on the forefront and protect their right to housing.
Thank you. I'm closing the Catch the Eye procedure now. I'll give the floor to Mr. Gott. Thank you very much. Thank you to the Commission for this initiative. It's the first time that the Commission is thinking about housing, and although some people would like to take the competence to here, I think it's important for us to look at what Europe is already doing, that Europe is, whether Europe is accelerating or construction or makes it more difficult. We in the EPP want more building, but also more renovation, and that's part of energy and energy issues part of that, because what's the good of having a house if you can't afford to live in it and heat it? I haven't heard anything about simplification of legislation, and I think we could win a lot through that. The simplification procedure is here for 2027. I'd like to hear more about that, because what we see in practice, and of course this is something very, very difficult in the Netherlands, we have a densely populated area, and the legislation means that permits are slower and slower. I've heard the Commissioner that he wants to go through European legislations like a bulldozer. I think it's important. And then there is the state aid proposal. I think this is really good news for the Netherlands. We've taken a good step here, and don't forget about the rules of settling, because we have more and more problems with nobody being prepared to take on important initiatives. Thank you. Ms. Bischoff.
So we're looking at a new chapter in European integration and a real proposal for affordable housing. This is what we lack disastrously, and we need to be aware that rent is eating up too much of our citizens' income. So can the EU now regulate everything like Superman from the top? No, of course not. But I'm pleased that we can focus on what we can do in Europe. And here we can give local authorities more room for manoeuvre. Short-term rentals have been mentioned. On that, it is important that we should really come up with specific legislation. Towns and cities need that, as do people in places which are affected by excess tourism. State aid, clearly an EU power. There we need more margin for manoeuvre for local authorities, for social and affordable housing, and cutting red tape does make sense. Nobody can understand how, when it comes with debt rules, we don't have more flexibility for defence expenditure, but not for investment in housing. We need both, and that is in order to increase people's safety. And the Commission has also mentioned the elephant in the room, speculation. Thank you. It's high time that we take action. We in the Parliament, we in the S&D will be there.
Thank you very much. Ms. Regeneration. Every time Europe decides to take action, we have the same result: more regulation and more constraints. At every crossroads of our existence, the Commission has done the same thing. They keep intervening and they keep failing. Today, the Commission has adopted its plan for affordable housing, but what we did not want was more intrusion in national legislation. What the housing sector really needs is structural changes to get out of the housing crisis. And that goes through a housing omnibus, so it's easier to get housing on the market and take away the excessive environmental constraints and reduce the cost of construction by tackling it at the root. So we don't want the Commission to keep interfering more and more. They should know that they should, when they should step back, and they should avoid creating crisis which they then try and solve.
There is a blue card by colleague Ohisalo. Do you accept that?
Puheenjohtaja, puhun suomeksi.
I will be speaking in Finnish, Madam President. The Housing Committee, having to do with the housing crisis, has heard experts from many different regions, and not at any stage did we receive information that markets have been able to solve housing crises. We need affordable housing everywhere in Europe. Now the Commission is actually doing something. It is not doing enough. We believe that we need more legislation, we need more concrete measures. But right-wing conservatives are cutting from people's well-being and touching upon people's level of living. What are you ready to do to improve the situation of people in Europe?
The main problem of housing in France is precarity. 75% of French could have social housing. And the reason for that precarity is the policies from the EU, which means that workers have too low income to be able to afford housing, and also constraints on construction, which was also adopted here, particularly constraints on energy renovation, which is why we want the European Commission to stop interfering. Thank you. Ms. Junco Garcia.
Gracias. Thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner, because this is a good beginning. This is a good beginning, this particular plan. But the problem that we have is very clear. We lack homes for European citizens. An example of a situation which involves supply and demand. So we've thrown the blame on different institutions that are out there, short-term rents and so forth. But it's not that we would be able to solve the housing problem with getting rid of those particular problems. I think we've simplified the issue. We need solutions which are concrete, which are tangible. We have to get rid of speculation on the part of local authorities, and we have to simplify the issuing of approvals and licenses, private, public, public, private. And we need, of course, legal security as well. It's not an ideological debate. It's a debate concerning reality. We have a systematic problem. What we're doing is propaganda if we don't provide systematic solutions, actually. Without investments, there will not be affordable housing, neither in Spain nor elsewhere in Europe.
Excuse me? Madame Junco Garcia, do you accept the blue card? By colleague Razoulis. And there is another one by colleague Nadella. We start with Mr. Razoulis in 525.
I'd like to ask your opinion. What do you think? Isn't it Europe itself that caused huge problems in the housing market? Construction license takes almost a year to be issued, while as regards more complicated construction, it would take even longer. There should be various requirements that have to be met, such as heating requirements, A++, etc. So is this governing majority that created such bureaucratic obstacles in receiving permits and making construction so expensive? Would you be able to remove these rules? Thank you.
Please, 30 seconds for the answer.
Por supuesto, contestaré en castellano.
I'll respond in Spanish, of course. It's one of those Those are one of the problems. Simplification, making a smoother system, particularly as concerns approval, just as you mentioned. Thank you. Permits, in other words.
The second blue card by Mr. Nadella. 312.
Parlerò in italiano.
I'll speak in Italian. Thank you very much. You've said that short-term rentals are not a problem for the emergency that exists on the housing market, but you know very well the situation in cities like Barcelona and Madrid, and of course in my country, Florence, Venice, Rome. This is a scourge. 30% of housing in the historical center has fallen prey to this type of system. In other words, short-term rentals, and this is totally unregulated. So I can't imagine that this isn't a problem. Or do we want to pretend that the problem doesn't exist? Is that what you're suggesting?
Barcelona.
No, in Barcelona it is regulated. In other words, there's a whole series of licenses. There are 30,000 in Barcelona in order to regulate the market for tourism housing, or in other words, short-term rentals. In other words, these are specific cases in specific cities. The same in cities like Madrid as well. So I don't think that the problem comes to getting rid of these 30,000 licenses for short-term housing. We're speaking about hundreds of thousands of families that need proper housing. It's something which is a problem in the centers of cities, historical centers, and elsewhere as well. They need, of course, all of those facilities that a city provides for. Thank you.
Commissioner, I went to the city of Galway on the western shores of Ireland, on the periphery of Europe, to talk about your affordable housing plan with Mary Frayne, just one of 4,000 people in the city on the housing waiting list. In the west side of Knocknacarra Community Centre, she told me the average price of a house there was €450,000. She says, how could this be affordable in a city with salary levels in that region? Your plan to attract additional public and private investment could be crucial there. Galway City and County Council officials told me the land bank is there at Ardown on the edge of the city where they could build 4,000 homes, but they need additional investment for the wastewater treatment plant. And I wonder, would your pan-European investment platform help projects of this scale? I wonder, would the European Investment Bank really be able to offer an attractive enough interest rate to fund this? Simplifying state rules would undoubtedly help here. That's a fact. Empowering the ATU and other technology universities to build their own accommodation would help. Restricting those short-term lettings in the stress zones would help. But what cities really need in these areas is the cutting of red tape in planning and permits. Local councillor Noel Thomas told me the hardship and frustration this causes, and we must call on our member states to grasp our opportunities to cut through the tape. Less red tape, more housing, Commissioner.
Dankeschön. Nächste Rednerin.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Toussaint.
Monsieur le Commissaire.
Commissioner, finally, we have this long-awaited plan to respond to the European housing crisis. We have over 1 million people who are street homeless, and several million are poorly housed in houses that are too small, too expensive, poorly insulated, or damaged by construction faults, and many others are struggling to pay the bills. And, Commissioner, you do know how to tell the housing crisis as it is, but if I look at how your plan might benefit the construction industry or investment funds, then I see that there is a key absence here, and that is the people at the heart of it. Where is the objective? What about the 30% rent? What's happened to a binding right to to homes or against evictions? And what are the solutions to deal with poor housing, uninhabitable housing? Commissioner, this plan seems to have been drafted in offices, but not really on the ground. So prove me wrong. Let's make sure that the money really gets to the people who need it. Let's ensure that tenants have a right to deal with rogue landlords and excess rents and stand up for poorer areas.
Blue card.
Would you accept a blue card, Ms. Toussaint, from Mr. Oliveira?
125, please.
Obrigado.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Madame Toussaint, you emphasized that it's a program that's more interested in construction companies and so on and so forth, and funds and banks. So my question is the following. Don't you believe that there is a lack, there's a missing strand as well, and that is the increase in social housing, state housing, in order to deal not only with poverty, but to deal with alienation, exclusion as well, for certain sectors of the population which cannot pay for housing? Don't you feel that that's been forgotten, that particular strand, that particular dimension?
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you. I think you're pointing up the fact that we need housing, not only for the most insecure among us, but also for a growing part of the population, including the middle class, who are also struggling to pay their bills or who are struggling to get on the housing ladder. And you're right. But at the same time, I would emphasize that there is an absolute need to channel public investment and also state aid. To this end, we're looking at a reform of state aid and services of general interest. We need to ensure that the funds are focused on those who are most in need, because otherwise the risk is that we see a deepening crisis. We've seen the explosion of housing crisis in Spain in 2007 to 8, and we have an absorption of public money by the higher classes in society. But I know that we can work on this together on the plan on poverty.
Dankeschön. Nächste Rednerin ist die Kollegin Andersson.
Our next speaker is colleague Anderson.
Commissioner, the financialization of the housing market has been one of the key drivers of the housing crisis, and therefore it is also one of the key problems that must be addressed. We must regulate short-term rentals, and we also need more financing instruments for non-profit housing. For a long time, Finland ensured that a sufficient share of all new rental flats were not for profit through state-guaranteed loans. However, this model is now threatened by lots of different causes, but one of them is that in 2022, Eurostat started counting state guarantees for these loans as public debt, even though they are not. This increased Finland's debt to GDP ratio by over 6 percentage points overnight, making support for non-profit housing less attractive to the government. This needs to change as soon as possible, as we should be removing barriers for affordable housing instead of creating them.
Thank
you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Laikova.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, today we are discussing the affordable housing in the EU, but many European cities experience exorbitant prices of 8,000 or 9,000 euro per square meter. This is totally prohibitive for young people. They will have to pay their mortgage until the end of their lives. And the blame is to be put on the European Union and the European Central Bank. The European Central Bank brought about inflation and money printing, and the new money reached those who were the big market players. In my own country, Bulgaria, there is the danger of speculation on the housing market. And the result may be that young people will leave their country because of Brussels. Thank you.
Our next speaker is colleague Yoncheva.
Madam Chair, colleagues, I'm glad that today we are discussing a topic which is so tightly intertwined with the social security of our community. And we were expecting the proposals of the European Commission for social housing. The goal is common, but the approaches towards this goal should be flexible enough in order to take into account the specifics in each and every member state. And I would like to see more ambition in the change of the rules for the state aid which would be allowed. This change will help the local authorities to carry out policies for young specialists that will contribute to the development of the regions. I have specific questions for Mr. Jurgensen. How do you see the role of the European Parliament in this plan, in the European strategy for housing? And when do you plan the summit on this topic? This was already mentioned by the chair of the European Commission.
Colleague Ferber.
Frau Vizepräsidentin, Herr Kommissar, liebe Kolleginnen, liebe
Vice President, Commissioner, payable housing has become the main issue of the day. A lot of people can't get somewhere to build because there's somewhere to live because too little is being built and too little is being investment. The problem is a supply problem, and we can only solve it by building more. And of course, Europe can help with that. Therefore, I welcome the fact that the Commission is now coming up with a European plan for affordable housing. Although building homes is not traditionally a competence of the European Commission, the question is whether this is really going to increase supply. It depends on three things as far as I'm concerned: less bureaucracy and more speed. Planning and authorization procedures must be speeded up and be standardized and digitized. And we should be able to have automatic authorization if too long time elapses. We need to see what is making building more expensive. It's got to be affordable to pay more to build. More rules doesn't solve a problem. We want standardization, modular building, new materials, and less costs. And certainly we've got to mobilize the financing. The EIB and national banks must be used and private fortunes must be invested. This is the task that we must solve together. Thank you.
Blaue Karten initiiert.
3 blue cards for Mr. Faber. Now, for Mr. Oliveira.
2 others. We have 3 blue cards on this one. So, but Mr. Kelly is from the same group, so you're not allowed. Sean, you're not allowed to ask someone from your group. So this leaves us with one person, which is Nico Stefanuta. Please.
I would appreciate it.
Herr Ferber, sitzt hier. Sind Sie sicher?
Mr. Ferber, are you sure that it's only an issue of what's on supply, what's on offer? Imagine a student, or somebody who's just begun his job or her job, and they have a very, very limited resources. They'll never get a loan from any bank, irrespective of what the market has to offer, irrespective of what sort of new housing is out there for 200,000, for 300,000 or more euro. So how can a young man or young woman, how can they afford that irrespective of what's on offer on the market?
Let me explain to you how the market economy works. Prices come up are made up of supply and demand. If you have more demand than you have supply, prices costs rise. But if you have more supply, the prices come down. And therefore, the rents are going to come down if you have more supply. And if you don't want to understand that, you have to consider whether you've understood our systems, our economy systems. Supply and demand are the 2 elements of price building. Thank you. Ms. Schieder.
Frau Präsidentin.
President, Commissioner, colleagues spoke about supply and demand. That's wonderful and fine, but in the housing sector we see that the market has failed and hasn't really made the possibility of affordable housing there for people. And the reason for that, because it's not it is a fundamental right of individuals. It's not a good as such. And a huge number of people say that they want the European Union in this particular field to regulate. And I think it's very good that the Commission today comes to us with this particular housing plan, because we have to do something at the European level. We have to have EU money going in that particular direction. We need to support housing for those with limited resources, and that's why we have to take a look and revisit the competitiveness rules that we have, and we have to bring an end to speculation on the real estate market. We have to fight that. We have to protect rents. And, of course, at the same time, we have to regulate short-term rentals. This affordable housing plan is not the end of the discussion. It is the beginning of our work in Europe for affordable housing. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is colleague Hölvenier.
Dankeschön, Frau Präsidentin. Tisztelt képviselőtársaim!
Thank you, colleagues, members. This crisis shows a different face in different regions. But if we are to succeed, all 27 member states need to do their own homework in their own countries. This is a matter for member states. My country, Hungary, is trying to do its own homework, and it is making great efforts. 5% of GDP has been earmarked to support families. And thanks to these measures, 250,000 families have been able to buy a flat. There are people who are first-time buyers. They are able to get more affordable loans. This has meant that 40,000 young people, within a period of a few months, have been able to buy their own home. Now, we believe that illegal immigration is something which cannot resolve this crisis, quite on the contrary. As a result of illegal immigration, we have further housing problems. So we ought to ensure that we do not support that.
Malung. Next speaker is colleague Malung.
Ladies and gentlemen, demographics doesn't start in statistics. It starts in housing, because young people don't want to have children, not because they don't have a family, but because they cannot solve their housing problems. Housing prices are growing very fast, faster than income. On the other hand, we have more and more senior citizens that may be living on the fourth floor without lift. So we cannot expect that the European Union will build houses for us, but we should expect that the European Union will give us the direction that will see the citizens and their identity, respect for the people. So if we want to solve the demographic crisis, we need to start from the beginning. First thing first.
Dankeschön. Als nächster spricht der Kollege Heusig.
Colleague Heusig.
Ďakujem. Domov je základom nielen pre rodinu.
Thank you very much. Housing is really a basic need for all families and for their life quality. It is a threat to the future of young people in Slovakia and throughout Europe. In Bratislava, for example, an average young person would have to save up their total salary for 24 years before they can afford housing of 75 square meters. That is a failure at national level. We therefore need a European solution, and I'm happy to see that the outcome of my work as well is that we have a proposal from the Commission. But there are aspects like digitization and the use of brownfield sites instead of agricultural land, the use of new ecological materials. All these things are part of the solution of affordable housing.
Colleague Scuderi, imagine trying to find a solution for an individual who needs housing, an individual who has a scholarship and who's unable to find any kind of student housing whatsoever, because the market has decided that the particular home that this particular individual could rent has become Airbnb. The individual is homeless, without a roof over their head. This is the problem of people under 25 years of age. On a daily basis, thousands of students are excluded from the housing market altogether. No, we have this particular housing plan right now, but we have to look at the priorities. House is a fundamental right. It is not a merchandisable good. It is something that is a right, once again, to individuals. And living comes before everything else, above profit, above speculation. No, we can't have simply building new houses. We have to regulate the market so that we don't have this particular system where speculation rules. So what we have to do is invest in public housing and make sure that that it is provided, housing is provided for those who are the most vulnerable. And we have to have regulation of the short-term rental market. Housing has to be put at the absolute center of our policies. Thank you very much.
Catch the eye of Mr. Oliveira. I think you can have one more, but then it's a blue card. I'm sorry, what's the matter? A blue card. But then the second, and then, okay? The others also want to. 1 to 5. If you accept it. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Now, Madam Scuderi, you mentioned speculation, and indeed, it is one of the most fundamental problems behind the housing crisis. The program of the European Commission calls for increase in construction of housing. So without measures against speculation, how are we going to resolve the problem of housing? Even if we build hundreds of thousands of new homes, isn't it necessary to have specific measures in place in order to limit speculation? In other words, to guarantee that new homes will be accessible to all and not be the target of speculation overall. Thank you. Absolutely, yes. Mr. Oliveira, I am completely in agreement. We can't speak about the possibility of a solution only in construction, whatever type of housing that is, particularly when that housing comes under funds, under the control of banks. Indeed, it will be of no help whatsoever. We need public housing, and we have to guarantee that these particular new houses that will be built will be accessible to the simple man on the street, and it will be affordable. I'm in complete agreement. Without measures against speculation, we won't be doing anything. We will not be having a program for housing, but we'll simply provide to the coffers of construction companies and speculators. Thank you.
And Colleague Montero.
Colleague Montero is our next speaker.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. A month ago, an 80-year-old man in Torremolinos shot himself because he was threatened with eviction by the bank. I don't know whether his flat has now become a tourist flat rented out at great expense, or whether it just belongs to the bank and is empty. But the problem is that you defend speculators, but you never take on board the consequences that this has for people's lives. Property speculation kills. Last year, the profits from Spanish banks grew by 20%. Those are the macroeconomic figures that the government announces, but the people cannot pay their rent, and evictions have increased by 20%. Does anybody care where those people end up living? Where are they going to spend Christmas? Where are they going to dine on New Year's Eve? If somebody rings at the door of an empty flat, then you complain about squatting as if the squatters were in the wrong. The problem is that the housing business is property violence. You are endangering people's lives for the few to earn money. That is a form of violence. however much people wear expensive suits and ties. And what we need, Commissioner, is to get back our moral compass, reduce the prices of housing by law, expropriate houses which are taken by mutual funds to give them to the people, and those who want to speculate can go to rob somewhere else. Thank you.
Do you accept the blue card? But I have to ask Mr. Perez, you are also the next on the speakers list. Are you sure that you also Could you move to the Parliament's place, please? This is the Commission's space. Thank you. So, on 218, please. If you accept it, you do, right? You accept it. Okay.
Ahora sí. Disculpe.
There. So I understand that I can't use those seats over there, but I wonder whether we can have a conversation without exchanging insults or calling each other fascists or whatever, because I think today we're trying to reach a conclusion on a debate which we all care about. And listening to you, I've been spending a lot of years listening to you talking about the issue of price controls for rents and so on. But in the places in Europe and in Spain where they have been introduced, rental prices have gone up. The rental prices have gone up and the supply has fallen. In Barcelona, for example, by more than 20%. And that's because of that kind of policy. Every flat is now being offered at much higher prices. So the President has interrupted.
Ask her a question. Was that a question?
Yes, that's the question,
okay,
actually.
that's the question. Then please.
Are you still defending the prices control system?
Okay.
Yeah.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Well, thank you very much. Firstly, if anybody is a fascist, then we should say so. Because when in Europe we have fascist governments, what happens is that we have racism, we have machoism, and people live worse and inequality grows. So we need to call a spade, even if you don't like people saying what you are. That's how things are. And then when governments intervene in housing prices, prices fall. And that is what happens when Podemos is in government. And when the PP lifted the ceiling on prices, prices went up. Of course it works. And of course, expropriating housing from mutual funds works. And of course, reducing rents by law works. Of course, it works to ban tourism flats and make them available to the people. What doesn't work when it comes to controlling prices is building houses for speculation.
Jetzt erhält das Wort nochmal der Kollege Perez.
And once again, Mr. Perez has the floor.
Irene, basta ver irse.
Well, so many of the things that I've said are simply a lie. And though it may be a panacea, some people will think, I think one has to take into consideration in this particular issue when millions are being spent, hundreds of millions are being spent on a war, then it is very, very difficult indeed to make these particular statements about affordable housing. Now, neither the radicals nor those people of the left, as Mr. Montero said, nor those people from the right either. It is taxation. It is a system with 100,000 if... Let's not forget that 50% goes to is in the form of taxation on the purchase of real estate. This is the money that is causing the great harm. And the money goes directly to finance that which you're talking about. So don't speak about reducing taxation on housing, because it is actually this particular taxation system which is robbing those who want to purchase and putting it into the coffers and hands of others. Thank you.
Nächste Rednerin ist die Kollegin Doherty.
Colleague Doherty.
Commissioner Jorgensen, housing is now the single biggest cost of living pressure facing people across Europe. In Dublin, rents are at a record high. Young people can't afford to move out of their homes. Students are struggling to find digs. Even our nurses, teachers and Gardaí can't live in the areas that they're serving. And whilst I recognise that housing has never been a European competence, a European crisis requires a European response, and that's why the affordable housing plan that you've launched today is really important and really matters. Firstly, it focuses on supply. Europe's need more homes faster, and that means cutting red tape, speeding up planning and supporting modern construction methods so that we can deliver homes at scale without sacrificing quality. The housing simplification package is enormously welcome, but Commissioner, I really hope that we find the resources to deliver this as soon as possible instead of waiting until 2027. Our young people can't wait. It should also consider the impact of some environmental regulations. During a crisis, we need to take drastic measures, and I think the time has long passed for rebalancing the need between housing and critical infrastructure over environmental impacts of their construction. Secondly, this plan unlocks investment, real investment for Member States like Ireland that now can afford the delivery of housing supply for low and middle income households. Thirdly, it tackles short-term rentals in a housing-stressed area. In parts of Dublin, there are more Airbnb, empty houses, than there are people who are looking for houses. It's not sustainable. Fourthly, prioritising young people and students. More students need housing, innovative living models and support to reduce deposits. And I just want to say, just as a Vice Chair of the committee for the last year, you really have listened to us and really responded today, and I really look forward to supporting you in all of your endeavours. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms Doherty. There is a blue card. Do you want to take that? Ms Doherty, there is a blue card? No? Okay, thank you. Then I have an announcement. You probably received text about it. With the consensus of political groups, I wish to put to the House the following proposal for a change to the agenda. The following two debates this afternoon will be swapped. So the Commission statement, presentation of the EU cardiovascular health plan, will be taken as the second point, and the Commission statement, presentation of the automotive package, will be taken as the third point. If there are no objections, this change is approved. That's the case. Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Mebarak. For 1 minute, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, thank you for the plan and the proposals. As you said in your introduction, the housing crisis is not just about figures, it's lives ruined by the lack of a roof over their head, and the fact that people have had to live in the street or in temporary shelters, and there is a need to bring back justice and solidarity to the wild west of the real estate debt market. We also need to ensure that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We need to look at the possibility of state aid for social housing in France. There's a huge need here, about €1 trillion just for construction by 2034. So, Commissioner, if we're mobilising 7 billion here, 10 billion there, it's still not going to add up, is it? How are we going to get to €100 billion in the next budget just for housing?
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Latinopoulou. For 1 minute, please.
The housing crisis and the lack of homes that we see today in a lot of member states is the result of the socialist policies you impose. The reasons are the following. First of all, profit has been criminalized. When you demonize profit, you are murdering a whole sector of the economy. Second, there is very heavy taxation on housing, and as well as a lot of other houses. Thirdly, we have this mania you have with green energy that drives up construction costs. Fourth, we have the state in its many forms, welfare state, subsidization of rent, that not only drives up rents, but it also creates a black economy. And another point, you keep importing people. So we need to talk about the truth. You have failed. Socialist economic policies are the death of the European Union at every level and, of course, in the housing market. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Frakos. For 1 minute, please.
Thank you. Housing is a connective link between society and economy. Without adequate housing, we cannot have stability, because housing creates the conditions for a society with investments and prosperity. Otherwise, there can be no productivity or inclusion. Just imagine living with 850 euro in the border areas in Evros or on roads. Imagine paying for your house for decades and then losing it because of the financial crisis. So we want to cater for young couples who are trying to create a family that avoid the no-go zones of illegal immigrant ghettos in the city centers. We don't want to become a nation of tenants. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Aguirre-Goitia Martinez for 1 minute, please.
Bienvenido sea. This first accessible housing plan is very welcome. This is an absolute priority for our citizens, and we will study it with great care. We just received the press communique about this when we were already in the chamber. We need to see if this is in line with the recent plan for urgent measures related to housing that we recently adopted in housing. We need public-private funding for more quick construction of housing, and we need to mobilise, make use of housing lying empty, as well as increasing low-cost housing available. We have to put a stop to speculation, and also we need to relieve the pressures created by short-term rental markets. So we'll look closely at what's on the table. The only thing we can say at this stage is that we will continue to work on this, and we will send out a very clear message. We want to send out a message of hope for young people and families who are struggling in order to gain access to decent and affordable housing.
And the next speaker is Ms. Ilaria Salis for 1 minute, please.
Grazie.
Thank you. Italy is the country in Europe where you have the lowest cost of living, and we see that the average income is the average rent is 1,000 euros per square meter. So we're looking at high cost of living and low income. Affordable renting has become a privilege. We're seeing a complete disaster, social disaster. It doesn't have natural causes. It's basically down to specific political choices. And we can confront those if we want at European level. There's some simple measures that can be taken. You can tax property. You can have progressive tax on income from rents, and looking at short-term rentals as well and how that's dealt with, and make sure that you have a stock of public housing. Now, these are things that could be applied. We haven't heard it from the Commission, however. What do we expect? Do we still think we can avoid this sort of crisis that's hitting millions of people?
Okay, thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Isabelle Le Selenec for 1 minute, please. 1.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President. Commissioner, housing is a member state competence. Circumstances are different in different member states. Nonetheless, the Commission is presenting a European plan for affordable housing. Basically, it's about encouraging, recommending and inciting member states to invest in housing within their national plans 2028-2034. What I note at this stage is that there's a will to put out an inventory and an initiative here as to measures which could impact on demand and try to rectify that, and state aid reform, reduction of administrative formalities, to increase the supply of affordable housing where there is a need is also something that can be achieved through simplification. Please, a moratorium on standards. We
need to ensure that we mobilise both public and private sector funding for restoration, renovation with the help of the EIB, with the Invest EU programme, Social Fund for Climate, the Cohesion Fund. If we still keep it, of course, the work is only just beginning.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ms. Ginel for 1 minute, please.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Commissioner. Today, the Commission has kept its promise, responding to the demands of citizens and what the Parliament has been calling for so energetically, which is this affordable housing plan. It's a European response to something all too familiar to too many people, insecurity of housing, rents soaring all the time. This is based on the correct diagnosis, which is the crisis of accessibility, and is a social crisis too. We believe that we need to change our approach. We can't just build houses without thinking about who we're building for. We need to have social justice. We need to have public social housing, which is affordable and dignified and sustainable. We have to ensure that people can have a home without this using up all of their income. We have to have a protective housing policy. This is not ideology. We don't want to leave anyone behind in such a serious crisis as the housing crisis that we're in.
And the next speaker is Ms. Werbrook for 1 minute, please.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam President. Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, the housing crisis is a reality across Europe, but it's not seen in the same way depending on which country or territory you're in. Over the course of 8 years, we're seeing an average increase of 50% across the EU, but there are differences across the EU. 73% in Hungary, 23% in France, 5% in Finland. These figures tell you something quite clear. There's not a single crisis of housing. There's several housing crises. More than a quarter of the French income goes to housing in France. More than 40% of young people who are leaving their family home later and later, going to study or going to find places to live, very difficult to find short-term housing. Let's be clear. It's the member states who have within their competence housing, who don't have the legitimacy, nor the mandate, nor the efficiency, nor the legal background to be able to impose these sort of harmonised policies on our countries. What you're trying to do is go via the Charter of Fundamental Rights, and nobody's taken in by this. Of course, we're open to any form of administrative simplification that's genuine, that will allow France to better mobilise the funds that itself is paying in, but only if this allows the member states to act in a sovereign fashion. Europe should be helping, not restricting.
Werbrook, unfortunately. Sorry. The next speaker is Ms. Magoni for 1 minute, please.
Thank you, President. It's not a luxury to have a roof over your head. It's a fundamental right. There are young people, families and vulnerable persons who are in danger of losing a roof over their head because of the high prices and markets out of control. The Commission does need to tackle this, monitoring speculation and ensuring greater transparency will be vital instruments in order to assist those who live in cities. So we're pleased to note that there will be a new approach here, providing economic support, not replacing the other authorities. We need to take account of the specific needs of each territory. The region of Lombardy is a good example of that. Rent support and public policy has helped recover 7,000 properties, which have helped many more families. This shows that tangible rather than ideological policy can achieve a real outcome for dignity, hope and the future. We should not leave anyone behind, and we should ensure that we do not see abusive landlords. For the sake of Italy and Europe. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm not a communist.
Next speaker is Ms. Kondura for 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much, dear Chair. Mr. Commissioner, in Greece, the citizens spend almost 1/3 of their disposable income for housing. A large percentage of them stay with their parents, whereas in the last 3 years, we have had a lot of houses being sold off from banks. We need to have a fundamental right to housing. We need to protect citizens from being thrown out of their main residence. And the cohesion policy should give a priority to creating housing for people that work for public services, especially in the islands. Moreover, the local communities should have an enhanced role in planning and realizing housing policies. Also, public investment in housing policy should be exempt from the rules of the Stability Pact, and we need to see again the rules on state aid. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Falcone for 1.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Signor Commissario.
Commissioner, we're very much in favour of the proposal for this European plan for having affordable housing. The topic of housing is something that I'm sure should feature on the European agenda. On the one hand, we are satisfied with a new strategy on housing, but at the same time, we cannot be sure about resources being made available. Simplification is good. Trying to simplify is also good. Looking at the links between public and private is also good. But we need to make sure that there are financial instruments that are clear and specific in place. We also need to look at reduction in tax for those who are investing, for example, reducing VAT. For us in Forza Italia and the European People's Party, the home is sacred. It's something that lies at the foundation for the establishment of a society. And we need to have a pragmatic, a concrete and efficient approach. This is the only way that Europe will be able to win on behalf of our citizens.
Mr. Falcone, there is a blue card from Ms. Toussaint. Do you want to take it? Please, Ms. Toussaint, seat 29, please.
Monsieur Falcone.
Mr. Falcone?
Merci.
Thank you for accepting my question. This forms part of democratic debate. You belong to a political group that presented a programme for housing called Build, Build, Build. So I wanted to ask you a question. There are some people who think that the earth is flat, and there are those who think that land is infinite. When you say build, 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 you're not taking into account the fact that a large part of our European territory is already urbanised. Some is not usable, some land is polluted, and if we just spread out urban sprawl further and further, people are going to be further and further from where they work, and they will have to cover more and more kilometres in order to get to work every day. So my question is, are you sure that you want to build, build, build? Do you not think there should be some limits?
No, cara collega.
No, dear colleague. The European People's Party document coordinated by Ms. Borja Jimenez is very clear. On the one hand, there's construction, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we are using and reusing current housing stock. We need to regenerate our habitat in order to improve the quality of life of European citizens. And we're doing this in urban centres which are urbanised, but we also want to do this in rural areas and mountain areas and island areas as well to avoid rural depopulation in our territories.
And the next speaker is Ms. Isilda Gomez for 1 minute, please.
Senhora Presidente.
Madam President, Commissioner, this is a very important moment. The Socialists voted for the affordable housing plan. We're going to achieve it. We're going to achieve a social reality. Many do not understand the need for this and feel that markets can be left in control of everything. Markets alone cannot solve such a problem as this. What we have seen, in fact, is that the very lack of public intervention is what has created the crisis which we've had. We need public sector intervention. We need public housing, because only thus can we deal with this terrible circumstance where families find they cannot afford to buy, cannot afford to rent housing at market prices. Of course, not all countries are in the same position, so EU funding is absolutely vital. And I very much hope that this plan will also include significant EU fund availability, sourcing resources to help particularly homeless young people so they can have a decent home.
And the next speaker is Ms. Kathleen Función for 1 minute, please.
The housing crisis is the biggest challenge facing a generation of Irish people today. Of course, it's not an accidental crisis when we're talking about it for 10 years or more. It's a crisis caused by successive government policy who have prioritised vulture funds over ordinary workers and families. But the solutions to the housing crisis do exist, and I think it's really important that we focus on that in a debate such as this, and that the EU has a role to play in relation to this. Repeal the Non-Performing Loans Directive, which is nothing more than a directive for vulture funds. Relax EU fiscal rules so that countries like Ireland can use their own money to invest in housing, and return decision-making powers to local councils. Decisions should be made as near as possible to the people and communities that they affect. It's time that we bin the failed policies that clearly do not work and which only help to maximise the profits of developers. It's time to work towards a genuine and radical housing policy that does deliver for all of our communities.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Mr. Sebastião Bulgalho for 1 minute. 1 minute and a half, please.
Madam President, Mr. Commissioner, o plano de habitação acessível.
The affordable housing plan presented today is not a plan because it is something which helps European people. It affects those who are most vulnerable. It helps member states to help others, and it does help us find answers. Over the next few years, we've got 43 billion euros in existing funds. The next MFF can and should increase the sums allocated to housing. If we can achieve the 10 billion figure for 2027, then we'll be able to help solve this problem for the next generations. We need the social fund, we need students to be helped too. We need to ensure there's a European guarantee for young people's first home. We need to ensure that this is done by 2027. This will be the end of your mandate and the end of mine. This should have been done yesterday. We need new mechanisms with new funding. 70% price increase over a decade is a kind of situation that we have to tackle, and Invest in You can help. As von der Leyen said, Europeans are concerned about issues. That means the EU must follow those concerns and deal with them. And so we recognise that housing was a social need 8 years ago. We can't wait until 2029 before we actually make some of these plans a reality.
Yes, Mr. Marco Vesliaj for 1 minute, please.
Thank you. Today, have a decent apartment that would be affordable for many is a luxury. In Croatia, 70% of young people are not able to afford to buy a flat. That is why I would welcome the adoption, the European plan for affordable housing. But we should be stronger and more determined. We need more finances, more means to invest in housing, be it in the multi-annual financial program. We do have to give support to young people. It's good to mention students, but there are young people who are not students, who live in rural areas, and they are not often mentioned in this plan for affordable housing. And to conclude, if we want flats for all, then we have to have as a key ally local and regional authorities.
Fortunately, much more speakers request for speaking time than I can give out, so I've tried to use some objective criteria. If you haven't been speaking earlier in the debate, try to distribute all over the groups and also a mix of countries. So I tried with some objective criteria, and I do apologize for those of you who will not get speaking time. I will begin with Mr. Marcos Rosenpere, seat 311, please.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Madam President. The progress we've made is thanks to the Social Democrats. We've placed the housing crisis at the focus, at the heart of the debate, calling for action. Months ago in this Parliament, we adopted a reform of the Cohesion policy saying that the ERDF can be used to support affordable housing. And today, Commissioner Jurgensen, we welcome your European Affordable Housing Plan, a plan that is made up of measures that will help to promote public housing that will stabilise prices and bring more balance to a market that has been captured by the greed of a few. This has to be given priority in the next budget. There needs to be a budget on a scale that's never seen before at European level. We are giving housing back the status of a basic right. We are putting an end to speculation, and we are converting the frustration of a generation to hope, opportunity and future. Thank you.
Please remember 1 minute. The next speaker is Mr. Michael McNamara, seat 93, please.
Thank you very much, President. Again, Commissioner, I welcome you and very much welcome your plan of, or rather the presentation of the European Affordable Housing Plan. And what it contains, a loosening of the rules around state aid to allow for more national funding and additional EU funding, as well as a discouragement of speculative investment. All of that is very welcome. Again, Commissioner, I welcome your balanced approach in saying that, yes, Airbnbs are a problem, but we're not going to ban them completely. I'm from a country which has effectively banned them completely, has no plan whatsoever on enforcing it, and I come from a county within that country that is very reliant on tourism but doesn't have hotel beds for a variety of reasons that I don't intend to go into. So it is a matter of balance. We have failed, though, as an Irish government, and we're not alone in that, it seems a pan-European problem, to build houses. Instead, we've built an edifice of state control, of agencies, of regulators, etc., which soak up political energy, soak up exchequer capital, but don't actually deliver housing for our people. That is a huge problem that needs to be tackled as well.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ms. Katrin Langensiepen, seat 28, please.
Wohnraum ist keine
Housing isn't a speculative object. It's somewhere for us to live, and I hope you've heard that, Commissioner, and hope under your leadership we'll see that. So we need to make sure that we can ring-fence this. Every citizen is wondering if we can make sure that they have access to that. Older people as well. We're an older continent. Well, it's no good if there's a lot of offer available, but the expenditure you'd have to spend on it is far too high. If I'm a mother with 2 children living alone, or an immigrant, or somebody who has a disability, doesn't matter how much money I slap on the table, because somebody says, well, sorry, we don't let you rent if you're in a wheelchair or if you're a single mother, because you're not the sexy clients that they want. But that's not what it's about. It's about making sure that we can have people getting housing, not rich shits getting whatever they want.
Okay, is Volker Schnurbusch, seat 444, please.
Danke, Frau Präsident.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, the European housing problem is a homemade problem. Not only are fewer housing units being built, but the mass migration in Europe means that the demand for housing is growing, even though the locals are discriminated against in competition for them. So Europe should protect its external border better. and also we are saying that we need more insulation to combat the consequences of climate change. What we need is a reaction that isn't just something caused by the EU itself. Housing, fortunately, is not yet within the prerogatives of the EU, and that should remain a national problem to resolve.
Speaker is Mr. Kostas Papadikis, seat 811, please.
In Greece and the EU, there has been an explosive situation when it comes to housing. In Greece, 40% of people's income goes to housing. We see thousands of houses being auctioned off, even of people with disabilities. There have been some programs to buy a house, to subsidize rents, etc. But this has led to a further skyrocketing of prices, and it has helped the funds who keep acting as vultures. Only people can save people's houses. They need to fight against bank lobbies, funds, and developers in order to eliminate capitalist profit. This is why people want to have a housing policy that will provide cheap housing subsidized by the government without developers and other companies in the middle. No more auctioning off of houses and stop this policy.
The next speaker will be Ms. Rosa Serrano Sierra, seat 713, please.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Madam President. Commissioner, thank you very much for this presentation. This is a step in the right direction. We don't know whether it'll be enough, though. The housing crisis which our citizens face, especially our younger citizens, and especially in rural areas, is one which requires far-reaching, courageous measures. In the Aragon region, the People's Party is keeping housing out of reach, encouraging speculation and leaving it in the hands of the market. As socialists, we defend the human right to housing. We don't see housing primarily as a business. For that reason, we need to build affordable public housing which remains affordable forever. Keep it out of the claws of vulture funds and speculation, so that people come and stay in rural areas. Only in that way can we have housing which is decent and affordable for all Europeans.
Well, I just want to say to Mr. Aguilar Lopez, what I'm doing is but before I give you that, let me say that what I've tried is that I cannot give speaking time for everyone. We don't have time for that. I have chosen on the basis of different objective criteria. And I do apologize, but you have to respect my decision. But if you have a point of order and you have to be able to quote a paragraph, an article, then I will give you the floor, please. Please, your microphone.
One of the rules of procedure, which is exactly the observances of the rules of procedure when it comes to make the combination of the catch and the blue cards. We have seen more than 20 blue cards in this debate. And then all of them granted, even for people who were on the speaking list that have taken the floor after having a blue card, and then there is no time for catch the eye. There should be a formal announcement so that you should know which are the rules you should be sticking to, but no improvisation and no arbitrariness when it comes to applying the rules of procedure. Thank you, Madam President.
Well, we have been more than one to share this debate. We have had 9 blue cards. And that is more than we normally have. So we have been trying to include as many people as possible, and I do apologize. I know it's frustrating. It is a very important topic for many of us, but that's how it is, and I will continue with the speakers list. And the next one will be Mr. Billy Keller, seat 9, please.
Thank you very much. I welcome the publication and presentation of the European Affordable Housing Plan. And just to say at the outset, Commissioner, we have to succeed in this. At the moment, across most of Europe, we have a housing crisis. It's fracturing society. undermining social cohesion and harmony, and undermining intergenerational solidarity. And we're now in a situation where we're in a demographic spiral as well, where people simply can't get involved in family formation. They're delaying that, and that is putting huge pressure on our demographics across Europe. Social and affordable housing is a key area, and the lifting of state aid rules to ensure that states can invest directly in housing is a critically important component. From my perspective, and in Ireland, one of the significant challenges we have is in our inability to go through the planning and the permitting system, not only directly for houses themselves, but for the infrastructure that's required to underpin them, water, roads, and waste as well, and electricity. So clearly, from the planning and permitting perspective, Commissioner, I would urge that you would use everything possible to benchmark across the entirety of the European Union the speed at which plannings and permitting are granted, and that they can flow through the process in a seamless way so we can start building houses.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The next speaker will be Ms. Ana Miranda Paz, seat 186, please.
Señor Comisario de Vivienda.
Commissioner for Housing. It was about time the European Commission started dealing with this issue, which faces so many Europeans, especially Galicians. Housing is a major issue for the people I represent in this House. We have to stop abusive rents and speculation. We have to stop people being thrown out of their homes to the benefit of short-term tourist lets. We need to have a more effective system with better insulation, better protection against heat and cold so that people don't have to choose between heating and eating. The plan may have some positive points in it, but it's very tentative so far. We're not trying to stop speculation in the housing market. There's no mention of the flexibility of the Stability Pact in order to help public housing. There's no mention of the structural reasons for the housing crisis. In the election campaign, we called for a housing fund EU-wide to support public housing, to combat speculation. Without a fund, you can't have a plan of this nature. One last point, if you need ideas, come to Santiago de Compostela, where we are combating speculation.
The thing is, we have a lot of people who wanted to speak, so you really have to respect the speaking time. Otherwise, it's not fair to the others, I have to say. Thank you. And the next speaker will be Mr. Kostas Madrives, seat 180, please.
Thank you. In 2021, our political group was the first one to raise the issue of a housing policy, and we managed to include it into the recovery mechanism. However, the governments could pick their own recovery plan, pick and choose it as they like, and my country, Cyprus, did not include €1 for this issue, despite the fact that we have a huge housing problem. But finally, we find out, better late than never, that there is now a European plan for housing, and that means when the markets fail, the institutions need to step in. And this can be more effective when we are confident in our own institutional powers and we're not just blindly trusting in the markets. Finally, we're moving ahead with this, and affordable housing is a right, not a privilege. And, of course, housing is something that has to do with families and demography. Thank you.
Yes, I think that was it. And with whom I promised speaking time, and then we will get back to the Commissioner and Commissioner Dan Jørgensen, the floor is yours to comment on the debate, please.
Thank you so much. So I want to thank members for the very good input, for the reception of the plan. I do think that many of the discussions that we've had in this House, especially in the Housing Committee, and the conclusions has been reflected in the plan. And of course now I look forward to seeing your own report, just as I look forward to working together with you on implementing the different objectives and policy proposals that we have in front of us now. I want to just comment on a few of the more concrete things that was brought up. One was the need for more simplification, especially with regards to permitting. This is certainly something that is also a part of the plan. We are very well aware that the housing sector in many member states are suffering because of bureaucracy and red tape. So we want to speed up permitting times significantly, whilst of course maintaining the balance with regards to protecting our environment, nature preservation and so forth. Second, on short-term rentals, it is very clear that in many cities in Europe, and I've met with countless mayors and city council members, ministers who've told me this, it has become a problem. Short-term rentals is, as such, not a bad idea. Actually, it's the opposite. For cultural exchange, for tourism, for some people, the income that they can get from renting out their homes might be what actually makes it possible for them to stay in their home. So all of these things are good. But when we see people not being able to live in certain areas of a city because prices have gone up, pushed by short-term rentals, because there's so much more money to be made in having short-term rentals than renting apartments or houses out to normal people, then of course it is a problem. It's important to realize, of course, though, that what we're proposing here is not a ban, it's not a regulation to limit short-term rentals that cities and member states has to apply. It is a toolbox. It is a way in which we can give cities, local communities, member states the power to actually do something if indeed they experience this problem. On speculation, I think it's fair to say that there are divided positions in this House. I will argue that whether or not you think speculation is a huge problem or you think it is not a problem at all, what we've proposed as a Commission, which is to create more transparency, to get the data, to see whether or not we can identify speculation, and if we can, what's the character and nature of it, and what can we do to remedy the situation, should be in the interest of everybody. And finally, I very much appreciate that many of you has mentioned our special responsibility towards more vulnerable people in our societies. Homelessness is, of course, a huge problem, and we need to be better at sharing best practices. We need to be better at helping each other solve that problem, also because it is a problem that to some extent is also a European problem, because homeless people in many countries are actually citizens of other countries. So also that makes it, I think, reasonable for us to deal with this from a European level. I will finish by again thanking you and assure you that this is just the first step. This is the first ever affordable housing plan, but it is certainly not the last time we discuss these issues in this House and in your committees. I look very much forward to the collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Commissioner Jorgensen, for this, and congratulations on your plan here today. And with that, the debate is closed. And as you heard, the next item on the agenda is the Commission statement presentation of the EU cardiovascular health plan. And we have now had a shift in the seat of commissioners, and therefore I would like to welcome a new commissioner, Commissioner Vaheli, to the floor. The floor is yours, please.